If you're watching this video the day it came out, or if you rewatch these videos exactly a year after they're posted because you celebrate half its anniversaries like a real fan, then I'd like to wish you a happy Canada Day. As an American, I will be celebrating by topping my breakfast waffles with syrup that came from a tree instead of syrup that came from a ranch dressing bottle, but up in Quebec, about 120,000 French Canadians will celebrate today by moving into a new apartment. And if you think that sounds like a lame way to celebrate Canada's birthday, you'd be right. It turns out that this yearly mass migration has nothing to do with Canada Day. It's just a coincidence. The real explanation has to do with some archaic laws, some urban logistics, and oh boy, I smell content. Strap in, people, we're doing a long-winded explanation of Moving Day. Quebec's Moving Day dates back. Way back. All the way back to when Quebec wasn't just culturally a giant unnecessary extension of France, but legally a giant unnecessary extension of France. In fact, at the time, it was just called New France, which meant that it basically had the same legal system as Old France, but in a slightly different accent. Now, prior to the French Revolution, some parts of France were operating under a system called manorialism. Well, actually, it's really called the régime seigneurial, but my writers originally wrote around that since they thought I couldn't pronounce it, but they forgot that I am literally a genius. Essentially, manorialism, or the régime seigneurial, worked by dividing the king's land into self-sustaining farming communities that were maintained by independent farmers, and those farmers then paid rent to a landlord in either money, labor, or crops. This is the origin of the system that's going to prevent you from ever owning any property outside of a well-indexed Magic the Gathering collection, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Basically, this way of managing land largely took the king out of the equation, which made it ideal for a colony on the other side of the planet that had really bad internet at the time. The French colonial government split up New France among a handful of landlords, and then took on a group of habitants, or farmer settlers, to work their land. These landlords were entitled to a certain amount of labor from their tenants, but in return, they had to offer certain services and protections. For example, they were required to build a grits mill for their tenants to grind their wheat, and more importantly, they couldn't legally kick a tenant off their land until the winter snow had melted. This was because, in 18th century Canada, evicting a tenant in the winter was essentially a death sentence. I mean, it still is, but your lease probably has a clause stating that your landlord can kill you whenever they want, so that's on you for not reading the fine print. Anyways, this law was formalized in 1866 when the government set all urban leases to be renewed on May 1st. This became known as Moving Day. Fast forward 2 world wars and 2 seasons of Kojak to 1974, and Moving Day was causing some problems. Specifically, schools were still in session when everyone had to move, so kids would get home on May 1st and have no idea where everyone went. Or I guess they'd have to change schools mid-year. But either way, Quebec decided to repeal the mandatory moving day to make things easier for families and extended all current leases 2 extra months to July 1st. Even though these new leases could be renewed whenever, the vast majority of people decided that July 1st sounded like a good moving day and just kept doing it. Even to this day. Now, while syncing up everyone's leases sounds convenient, it can actually be a huge logistical headache. This is especially true in the city of Montreal, where around 7% of their entire population, or around 115,000 people, need to move all their stuff all at once. On top of that, most of these moves are into other apartments in Montreal. The city has the lowest home ownership rate in the country, and apartments are relatively affordable, so it's fairly easy to just swap apartments if you're feeling bored or if your upstairs neighbor just got really into K-pop. For the city, this means rerouting hundreds of thousands of pieces of mail in a single day, dealing with upwards of $10 million worth of cleanup costs, and reconnecting nearly 7 different landlines. For moving companies, it can be even more exhausting, even if Moving Day sounds like a fake holiday invented by an evil moving company to get people to move. Rather than have their business spread out throughout the year, these companies need to be prepared to make a huge chunk of their profits in the span of just a few days. Most can expect to make about 15% of their yearly revenue on Moving Day alone. In order to keep up with demand, local moving companies also tend to double or triple their rates around the holiday, so you're probably better off being kicked out in the dead of winter anyway. So, also because it's July 1st, it's a new fiscal year for Microsoft, the state of Delaware, and plenty of other esteemed institutions, and you know what they say, new fiscal year, new me. So make FY 21 to 22 count and better yourself by learning something you want to learn. For example, I know plenty of you always ask me how to become a YouTuber, and the first thing you need to do is learn some skills. For example, you need to learn how to animate, which you could do with Polymatter's Make Animated YouTube Videos class on Skillshare, and you need to learn how to write engaging nonfiction, which you could do with the Creative Nonfiction Write Truth with Style class on Skillshare, and you need to learn how to manage your time, which you can do with Thomas Frank's Productivity Masterclass class on Skillshare. You're probably getting the message. Our sponsor, Skillshare, is the best place to go to learn new skills, as they have just an endless catalog of high-quality classes taught by the people who actually use these skills. On Skillshare, there are no ads, they're always launching new classes, and their existing catalog is incredible, and they're now offering a full month free when you're one of the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description.